Hello, welcome to the show. Welcome to Not Just Nintendo, the video game podcast that is about Nintendo, but it's not just Nintendo here at Not Just Nintendo, as I talk about other video games and other video game companies as well. Welcome back, everyone, this time to episode 34 of Not Just Nintendo. 34, obviously, now we are officially more than a third of the way to episode 100. Last time, I was like, oh, we're a third of the way. Technically, 33 is a little bit less, 34 is a little bit more, but either way, we're around about a third of the way to episode 100 numbers-wise. Now, of course, I can't guarantee anything because, like I said, the podcast on multiple occasions has been weekly, and on multiple occasions it's been bi-weekly as well, so it kind of changes around a little bit. So, I can't say for sure whether or not it's, how many episodes it's going to be, right? Or, sorry, I know how many episodes. I don't know how many weeks it's going to be, right? Like, it could very well be more than 66 weeks, right? Because we could potentially go bi-weekly again for a period. So, I don't really know. I'm not going to make any predictions. Like, I'm not even going to get into it. But it'll be more than a year either way till we reach 100. I would guess probably closer to 2 years. So, we'll see what happens, but that's kind of where we're at. That's a long ways off, but I still think it's pretty cool that we're a third of the way there, and, episode 50 is not really that far away in the grand scheme of things. That'll come up on us pretty quickly. Also, end of the year, let's talk about that, because, wow, it's December 1st when I'm recording this. You guys are watching this, or at least, the episode is coming out on December 2nd, as long as things don't get delayed, which I'm hoping they won't be, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, yeah, it's December 2nd for you guys, which is crazy because, that November kind of flew by. And honestly, I think the second half of this year, honestly, has gone pretty quickly, I would say. I mean, I've not played... On one hand, I've not played as many games as I was hoping, but at the same time, I'm also kind of happy with some of the amount of things I've been able to get done. It looks like my end-of-the-year ranking is probably going to be about as many games as the last one, as long as I finish up a couple of the things that I was hoping to finish up before the end of the year. I will end up beating... That doesn't make sense. I will have ended up beating less games overall, but last year I replayed more stuff, and so I think it'll end up roughly evening out. I've also stopped counting Super Mario Brothers when I beat it, and also Mario 64. I've stopped writing that down, because what I used to do is I would write down every game I beat, those included, and then I would star the ones that I had beat for the first time that year. Or at the very least, like, first time, like, there's a couple games that I beat or got very close to beating when I was, like, 5 or something, or 6, right? 7 or 8, like those kind of area, like a long time ago. And so for that stuff, I usually just count it as a star. I'm like, look, this is my first time, even if it might not actually be my first time. There's a couple of games that I don't even know for sure whether or not I beat them. Some of the Mario and Luigi games, like, I watched so many Let's Plays back then, and I also played them so much that I'm not even entirely sure if I beat them myself. Like, that's how long ago some of these, like the earlier Mario and Luigi games, like, I'm pretty sure I beat Superstar Saga. If I do beat it again, I'm just going to count it as my first time, though. But I can't remember whether or not I beat Partners in Time. I almost want to say I didn't. And same thing for Bowser's Inside Story. Like, I don't think I did, but, like, I don't, that it's been so long, like, I don't even really know, which is kind of weird to think about. But anyways, I've been playing video games for a long time, since I was very little, so it's, it's just one of those weird things that comes up when that's the case, right? And that might sound weird for some people because, I've been playing video games longer than most. I hear about some of the people on these podcasts, and it's like, when did you play your first video game? And they're like, oh, well, maybe here and there, but the first time was like, 7 or 8 or 9, and they remember the game, and I'm like, nah, man, like, it was like, I was, like, actually playing stuff at, like, 4 or 5. I beat Mario 64 at, like, 6 or 7. I was very young. Now, to be fair, I could not 100% it until I was, like, 9 or 10. But yeah, I've been playing stuff like crazy. But anyway, so my point is, I don't know what my point is. I'm just rambling. It's towards the end of the year, though. The year is coming to a close, and there's a few things that need to happen. First of all, I really need to beat a couple of games that I've been looking to beat for a while now, right? Um, I was gonna do a segment as far as games I've beat, but I also really haven't beat anything since last week. That was the big thing. We had some time off school. We had a whole break for Thanksgiving. And I played a lot of video games. I did. I also did a lot of things besides video games, but I did play a lot of video games. I mean, I've played a lot of video games. However, it was mostly all Yakuza Kiwami. And so I didn't quite beat the game. I'm very close. In fact, I'm recording this on Monday night. There's a chance that after I record this podcast, like I'm going to go play Yakuza Kiwami after this. If I stay up late enough, there's a chance I'll beat it tonight. I'm going to say more likely it'll be either tomorrow or even more likely probably Wednesday seems possible. It's just going to depend on homework and all that kind of stuff, all that jazz. But my point is like I'm very close to the end of that game within a few hours, I would say. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll find some post-game stuff to do, but I don't know. There's a good chance, actually. Now that I think about it, there's a good chance, because I've been doing a lot of extra stuff. I'm like 21 and a half or maybe 22 hours in. And according to How Long to Beat, that's only like 18 hours long, because I've done a lot of extra content. And I guess I can talk just a little bit about Yakuza Kiwami. I don't want to get too much into it, because I'm going to talk about it a lot next week, and I think that's probably going to be like most of the show next week is talking about Yakuza Kiwami. So I don't want to take away too much from that next show, I guess. So this show is going to be very short, because again, I want to save Yakuza mostly for next week. And also, I don't want to talk about any story stuff until I'm all wrapped up and I actually can really touch on that stuff and get into it a little bit more. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I did want to just touch on real quick. I just thought about this. Last week, we had a little bit of chaos. So as you know, you can watch the show on YouTube, right? It's on YouTube on multiple different channels. It's on my main channel, and it's on its own channel, which, by the way, if you're listening on the Ginger Ninja channel, you can also go listen on the Not Just Nintendo channel. It's linked in the description. It's another channel. It's also put in my featured channel pages, but it's another channel that is just for the podcast. And the idea is, hopefully, I don't know how long it'll be, but eventually I can move the podcast over there permanently. And the idea is to get it off of the main channel, not to delete episodes, but to stop putting new ones on there. Because eventually I want to do that to kind of declutter the feed for the main channel. So that's the idea. Will that ever happen? I don't know. But if what the heck was it? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on outside. I don't know if there was a car crash or what. But anyways, so that's the plan is to potentially eventually. That's kind of an interesting phrase. Potentially eventually to move the podcast permanently. In addition to YouTube, the podcast is also on Spotify. That's kind of the other main place. It's actually, I host the show through Spotify, and it gets uploaded, automatically to the YouTube channel, to both of them now. Spotify recently, there's been quite a bit of drama on Spotify, particularly with podcasts on Spotify. Lots and lots of shows, particularly video game shows, I've noticed, have been getting copyright flagged for use of copyrighted music, which kind of makes sense on a surface level. But for years now, I mean, many, many years, there's my favorite video game podcast, besides my own, of course, no, my favorite video game podcast, Not Just Nintendo. Big shout out to those guys. Those guys are awesome. A lot of what I do is influenced by them. And they're great people. They're very entertaining. They play a lot of games. They're Nintendo's biggest defenders and haters at the same time. It's great. Watch those guys. But anyways, that's my favorite, my personal favorite podcast. They've been going like 12 years, and they've hosted on Spotify or on Anchor before that entire time. And they do the same thing. They put video game music, and this isn't just them, it's not just me, it's lots of different podcasts that I've listened to. They put little snippets of game music at the beginning, at the end, in the middle of shows, right? Like as a way to break up segments, right? And I mean, this happens on other podcasts besides video games as well. They'll use little I don't know what to call them, but little pieces of music. This has been a thing for years. It's not anything new that anybody's doing. Is it like violating copyright laws? I mean, maybe. Like, I guess, yeah, kind of, right? Like, it is sort of. But it's been not really a problem for all these years because, generally speaking, the laws around it, like, it's not. There's not a ton of precedent, right, for companies actually striking these things. Obviously, you do see it a lot on YouTube with music getting flagged and stuff. Sometimes it's completely ridiculous when it does get flagged. Other times it makes sense. But with Spotify, it's not really been a thing, or with podcasts in general, it's not really been a major thing that I've heard about. But all of a sudden, in the last month or so, I've heard about all these podcasts getting episodes taken down or having to re-upload episodes because Spotify caught them with copyrighted music. And I'm the next target. I'm the most recent target. Maybe not the most recent, but I'm a recent target. Now, of course, I'm assuming this is an algorithm doing this. I would assume there's not somebody at Spotify that reviews every podcast and was like listening to my podcast. If so, hello, Spotify agents. Welcome to the show. No, I'm sure it's an algorithm, but there is something about it. It's like it'd be kind of interesting if there was somebody actually reviewing this, but it's definitely not. I'm pretty confident it's probably just an algorithm. But either way, they caught some of my music that I used in the last show from Florence because I liked to use little things. To be fair, I did put like quite a bit of that last song at the end of the show. Like it was like, I don't know, like 45 seconds, 50 seconds. Like it was quite long. And so they flagged that one. That one didn't completely surprise me. And then the one in the middle as well, which was like 20 seconds. I'm like, okay. Now the one at the beginning, which was like 10 or 15, and then me talking over it for another 10, that one they did not flag. And so they flagged it. They sent me an email. That's how I first found out about it. I got an email about how they were gonna remove episodes of my show. I'm like, dang, what? Like, I kind of expected it to be like all of them or multiple of them. It was just the one. And when I clicked on it, they're all like, oh, you can review. You can take action. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take action. Like, I figured, on YouTube, when you have copyrighted stuff, every now and then they'll give you the option to, use a different music track. Like, they have ones you can choose. Sometimes there's, you can trim out parts of the episode. And so I figured, I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I can just trim out the last 30 seconds or something of the end of the track, and I can trim out the thing from the middle, and then it'll be a little bit unnatural, the transition between segments without the music break, but at least then they won't delete my show, and I'll just have to explain in the next episode. Well, there were no options for that from Spotify. They had no options. Their take action options were like, all just to claim that you didn't use the music or that you had the license to use the music. I'm like, well, I don't have the license. So I was a little annoyed that they didn't have any options like that. And it made me realize, I'm like, oh, well, this is why all these shows are getting episodes taken down, because there's just not a lot of, Spotify doesn't give you options. So I know, it's awfully rich for me to come here and to complain, even though I'm the one who used copyrighted music. But the point is, it's not that big a deal. I re-uploaded the podcast without music. That version is the version that's on Spotify. It got uploaded to YouTube as well, and I unlisted it. Or actually, I think it's privated even. And my idea was I wanted to see, because it was getting deleted off Spotify, and it has since been deleted off Spotify. I'm not sure, actually. I should really check. I'm not sure if both versions are still around on iHeartRadio and on Amazon Music. I know that the podcast is on those two places as well. So it's a little bit strange, and I don't think I can really remove that version from the other places if it is there. So let me actually just check that right now, and I'll kind of figure that out as we're talking here today, because I have not actually thought about that. So if I go to my podcast on iHeartRadio, here we go. So episode 33 with the music has been removed on iHeartRadio and on Spotify and on Amazon Music. So everywhere except for YouTube, the only version of episode 33 that exists anymore is the one without the music. So that's fine. It's not a big deal. On YouTube, the version that is currently up, at least on the main channel, is the one with the music, which is interesting. And YouTube, even though they're usually the ones copyright striking me, they've not said a word about that version. And if I go to the podcast YouTube channel, Actually, they've went and privated both versions. YouTube does that sometimes. So if I go to the podcast YouTube channel, it's the same. Episode 33 with the music is the one public. The one without the music is private. So that's so that's how it is. So if you're on YouTube, episode 33 was totally normal for you. The only thing that might have happened is you might have got a second notification about it being posted without music, but then that would have disappeared because it's no longer there. So if you're on YouTube, it doesn't make a difference. If you're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on Amazon Music, which I don't think there's hardly anybody on Amazon Music or iHeartRadio, maybe one or two listens. But on Spotify, there are actually a few people now. If you're on one of those places, then things got a little weird. So I apologize for that. I will not be using the copyrighted music in the future. So that means that this show had no introduction music, which is a little strange. There's not going to be any music between segments. I will probably in the future not even really frame the show as with segments, because it doesn't really make sense to if I don't have anything to put in between the segments. And there won't be any outro music either. So it's not really ideal, to be honest. I might test it out with this show, just putting music at the beginning and the end and putting like shorter chunks of music. Something not from an indie game, too, because I think indie games are the most likely to get copyright striked as well. So I'm going to try that for this episode. There might have been some, like, Super Mario Galaxy thing or something, or Zelda thing at the beginning and at the end of this show, but there's not going to be anything in the middle. And then I will also have an episode or a version of the show ready to go in case they're going to copyright this one and take it down. So that's the plan. This one may end up having the same issue, episode 34. Otherwise, we'll be good, and we'll just keep doing that in the future. Now, I play violin. I play clarinet. I'm a musician. I'm not trying to say I'm like really good, but I have actually like composed a few short things for a friend of mine that was originally going to make a YouTube channel himself. Didn't work out. So I was thinking maybe I'll just make my own music. It's like I can just compose my own music. And maybe I'll end up using that for the intro and the outro. But at least for the time being, there's probably not going to be music unless there is in this episode. So just kind of bear with me here. It's a weird transition. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. Maybe the show will have to go on with no music. Maybe I'll make music. Or maybe we'll be back to normal. Maybe we can use music again, but we just got to be a little bit more careful about it. I don't know what the issue is, but I know this has been happening with a lot of people. So if you listen to any other video game podcast or even some non-video game podcast, you've probably already heard about this, because this is a thing that's happening all across the landscape, I suppose we'll say. So wasn't exclusive to me. If you were confused about what happened with the last episode, that's what happened. The episode did not come out late. If you're on Spotify or iHeartRadio, it actually did come out on time, but then it got deleted and then it came out late. So I apologize for that. So I guess it's not really my fault. I mean, it is kind of my fault because I did use the music, but I'd say it's more Spotify's fault here, because they've not copyright struck anything from the last like 20 years of people making podcasts. And so it's a little strange that all of a sudden here in 2025, they're like, hey, you know what? We should like crack down on this stuff. I'm not sure if they went through like a change of leadership, or maybe they just figured now was the time to make an algorithm to detect that stuff. Or maybe there was some sort of like settlement they had to do because some company was like, hey, you know, you're publishing or you're allowing this piece of content with our music. I don't know what happened. I don't really care what happened, to be honest. Like, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world, but it's a little strange. I know there's other things Spotify has been doing that a lot of people don't like. I'm not trying to get kicked off the platform, so I'm not going to talk about it. I also don't even know all the details. I don't think I'm actually going to get kicked off the platform, but I don't know all the details. I'm not going to touch on it. It is what it is. It works fine for me as a hosting service, and so even if the whole music situation is not ideal, we'll deal with it. So that's what's going to happen. So maybe the podcast will have to be musicless in the future. Maybe I'll make my own music. That would actually be kind of cooler in a way, right? But it is kind of a shame that I can't like talk about a game and then also have the music from it, because that's, I think, one of the cool things that ties together the show. So it is what it is. That's going to be enough of that. I don't want to dwell on this any further because I've been talking about this for like 10 minutes. So to wrap up the first segment, I guess, because I guess we're still doing segments, at least for now, to wrap up the opening segment of the show, I'm just going to talk about a few things that I've been playing and things that I hope to finish before the end of the year. There's not like a ton to talk about, and then we'll get into news, and I don't know how long news is going to take, but I do think this show will be a little bit shorter. We'll see what happens. So like I said, I've been playing a lot of Yakuza Kiwami. I definitely could have beat it by now, but I found myself doing a lot of side content. I did do quite a bit of stuff back when I was playing Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, which I finished that back in October, and I started that in July, I think, so it was like July to October. I did a lot of extra stuff in that game as well, and it's definitely like one of those things, like, you know, Yakuza, for me, at least having played these two games, almost a full 2 games. I really like the gameplay. That's like my main thing, right? I like the gameplay. I like the combat. I also like the progression in the sense that you've got like, you know, a skill tree or some sort of thing. It's been different in both the 2 games I've played. In Director's Cut, you actually used the currency, the yen, that you got from winning battles and from everything. It was the primary currency. You actually used that currency in the skill tree. Which I thought was a little weird back then, but I hadn't had anything different. I hadn't like used anything different in the series, and so I just kind of went with it. But in this game, in Kiwami, which originally actually came out first, so it's not like they changed something. It was, you know, Yakuza 0 was the weird one. But in Kiwami, you actually have like a separate, like, you get experience and you gain levels that you put towards upgrades on the skill tree. And there's like 4 wheels. And so that actually makes a little bit more sense. And I think I've liked the progression of the skills and stuff and the unlocking of abilities a little bit better in Yakuza Kiwami, because in Director's Cut, I felt like I was hesitant to spend my money on upgrades because I wanted to spend my money on other things, like buying items, like recovery items for battle and those kinds of things. And that so I feel like in Kiwami, it's I've definitely been more like every time I get enough points, I'm upgrading abilities. I've also been doing a lot more battles on the street. In Yakuza 0, I did quite a few. Basically, when you're walking around the street, whether you're going to do a side quest or going to do a main story mission, you can just get stopped by enemies on the street. And there's, you know, lots of different types of enemies. As the story progresses, you get more and more types of enemies. The enemies get harder. They're never like really hard, but you know, there might be some challenge to them here and there. But generally, they're pretty easy. I've been doing, like, lots of those battles in Kiwami, like, way more than I've needed to. I'll actually just kind of, like, specifically find groups to attack because I like to get the experience. And so I've been doing a lot of fighting. I like to level up the abilities, but I also just really like the combat in Kiwami. I don't think it's, like, that much different than Director's Cut. I don't think that's why I like it. I think it's just really more of a great thing, you know? I'm a huge fan of the combat in Yakuza. That's like the main reason why I'm there. There's some weird stuff, right? Like Yakuza, it's very zany, right? And so that's nice, you know, video games being zany. I like that. I like the story, right? The story has been very, what's the word? I'm intuitive. I don't think that's the word. There's something I would describe it as that I can't think of so far right now, but I'm losing it, man. But anyways, the story has been intriguing in both Director's Cut and in this game. I know, I would say overall, for those who don't know, Director's Cut, you follow 2 different characters, and of course the stories eventually collide towards the end of the game, but it's 2 completely different characters in different cities, even like they don't have much relation to each other until towards the end of the game. And so that was nice on some level in Director's Cut, which was a much longer game, by the way. Yakuza 0 was quite a bit longer. That was nice in a way because I felt like you could, you know, get a little bit of a story and then get a little bit of a break from it, you know, and then go to another one and like, but I also felt like at times it felt like the game was a little bit unfocused, right? Like I would get something and then I'd be left on a cliffhanger. And then also the chapters were pretty long in Director's Cut in Yakuza 0. I say Director's Cut, really I should probably just call it Yakuza 0 because that's like the main, actual game. But in Yakuza 0, I felt like the chapters were pretty long as well. And so I wouldn't always like I would sometimes get away from the game. I would play other stuff. And that's partially because I was playing other stuff, but I think it's also partially because the story was a little bit less captivating because it was broken up and disjuncted. So I would play one chapter of a story, or I think it's usually two. They would put it in groups of two. I'd play the 2 chapters of the story, but then I'd be interrupted by 2 chapters of another story, which, it takes me a minute to kind of figure out what's going on again. They give you a recap, which is helpful, but it's a little weird getting back into the groove, especially when both characters had quite different fighting styles, and so I felt like it was a little bit jarring sometimes going from one to the next. Also, if I took a week off from playing the game, which I did quite a few times because I was playing it during marching band season, I would sometimes struggle because if I came back towards the end of the second chapter of one of the stories, then it would be hard. I would be in a very difficult spot in the game, and it'd be very difficult for me to get back into combat. And then as soon as I did, I would be interrupted by the story that I'm just finally catching up with to go work on the other story, and then I'd have difficulties again, and that would, make me lose the motivation to play the game. And not that I was out of motivation. I definitely enjoyed my time through Director's Cut, and it wasn't a problem that I saw too much then, but after, in hindsight, after beating it, and now having played most of Kiwami, I feel like Kiwami's a little bit stronger in the sense that is a little bit more pushing you towards the end, right? I finish a chapter and then I'm all right, I want to see what's going on next, right? In Director's Cut, there wasn't as much of that because sometimes it'd be oh, okay, I don't get to see what happens for several more hours because I'm interrupted by another story. So I don't think it was necessarily a problem with Yakuza 0, especially since the whole idea of the game was to describe 2 different stories, right, that were taking place before the original game, which is Kiwami. So it makes sense. Kiwami doesn't have to do that, right? It only has to follow one character, and so maybe Director's Cut is at a little bit of a disadvantage, and they're probably doing it in the best way they possibly could, having both the stories like that. If I think about it, what's the other option, right? They would either have to have this, shorter gaps in between each story, longer gaps in between each story, or just completely separate each story, either in 2 different games or you play one after the other. And I feel like any of those things would have made the game a little bit less strong. So it's a difficult thing that Yakuza 0 was trying to do. It did it pretty well, but I still think that Kiwami, the cohesion, is a little bit better as a result. However, I think the actual story beats and the moment to moment, the plot twists and how the story develops, I think it's a little bit stronger in Director's Cut, interestingly enough. After I beat Director's Cut, there had been so many twists and turns in the story, it was almost hard to follow. I actually had to watch a few guides to kind of recap, not guides, but recaps, right? To be okay, here's what happened, this is why, whatever. I actually had to watch a few of those to really analyze the story, and I really came to appreciate how strong of a story it was. And when I started Kiwami, I was I don't think this game is going to be able to keep up with how incredible the story was in Yakuza 0, and it did. At the start, it was wow, this is great, There were a few things here and there. I did mention last episode how pretty early on in the game there's a time jump, and I won't get into why or what happens exactly, but the time jump was a little bit weird because after the time jump, it feels like not much has changed. It's a whole 10 years that are supposed to have jumped, and yet it feels like the actual progress in the city and in the characters around you feels like it's more 2 or 3 years, right? Especially when you look at the character design. Most of the characters in the game look completely identical to how they did 10 years prior. And when you've got somebody that's 20 years old and then they're 30, I feel like there should be at least somewhat of a difference, right? Or it's pretty noticeable, especially some of the old people too, right? You got 60-year-old guys in some of these higher up positions in the Yakuza. You would think that 10 years would show quite well. You would notice, wow, okay, those guys are getting even more old and decrepit. Where before they were they maybe had some gray hairs, and now they're really old. And it doesn't feel like that really happens. And that was a little weird. I'm not sure if it's because they didn't want to animate new character models, or if they just didn't think about it. I don't know. I really don't know what the whole deal was with that. But I felt like the time jump was a little bit weird. I shouldn't complain too much about the game not being realistic. Like, shouldn't it be realistic to begin with? It is what it is. But it was a little weird. For the most part, though, the first, few chapters of the story were crazy. Like, it was like one thing after another. Like, I was like, wow, this is incredible. It's really kind of continued the pace of, like, the very fast-paced nature of the story from Yakuza 0. But then things slowed down quite a bit. And I think, maybe part of it is because I started doing so many side quests and things. But I think generally speaking, there's just been less stuff in the story. The story's a little bit less full. I think part of it is because you don't have the interruptions that make you kind of ponder the story. And also, you can hear, like, there can be reveals in one story, and then there can be small tie-ins to another one. And so it can kind of help develop the universe and stuff in Yakuza 0. Kiwami doesn't have that advantage. And so I think at times it does feel like the story is a little bit less driving, right? There's just less going on, just in general. It's lower stakes as well. It's much lower stakes, just generally speaking. Well, in some areas, it's higher stakes. I don't know. We'll talk more about the story, the specifics of the story next time. But I have really been looking into in the last probably few months, like the general consensus on Yakuza, and it seems like most people think Yakuza 0 is one of the best games in the series. And it's one of those weird situations where, like, when you're trying to get into a series, and I usually try to start at the beginning chronologically, if I can, and if it makes sense to. But when you're starting a new series, a new game series, and you hear that you're playing the best game in the series, and you're liking it, then it's a little, like, worrying on one hand, because it's like, okay, well, great, I'm glad I started out with this one. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, will it suck after this, right? Like, am I going to love this game and then try to play another one and it's going to suck? Like, I don't know. And then, on the contrary, when you are starting a series and you hear that that's, like, the worst game in the series, and you like it, you're like, oh, well, I guess the next ones must get better. Or you'll end up having a controversial opinion. And if you hear that the game you're started out on is the worst game in the series and you don't like it, now you're like, oh man, I guess I got to give it another chance, right, with another game. And so it's just one of those weird situations. In this particular instance, Yakuza 0 is meant to be one of the best games in the series, and I felt like it was great. And so I was a little worried moving into Kiwami 1 that things were going to go downhill a little bit. And I think most people agree that Kiwami is also pretty good, but it's not quite as good as 0. And it seems like for me, I think it's better, or at the very least, pretty similar. I don't like, and on my end of the year list, I think both games will probably sit side by side as my thought process, and they'll both be very high. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but yeah, I'm almost considering putting Kiwami 1 above Director's Cut, but we're gonna see. I still have a couple hours here, and maybe some post-game stuff, so those last couple hours could end up being the deciding factor, but yeah, I think right now, I would probably put Kiwami in front of Director's Cut, so that's definitely something interesting to think about, because yeah, the general consensus is that Director's Cut is better than Kiwami, so we'll see on that front. I think one of the main criticisms of Kiwami is the lower stakes story that I was talking about, but I think the main thing that I want to point back to is that I generally care more about mechanics and gameplay in a game rather than story, and that's not always the case for everybody. So I definitely appreciate story. Like, I really liked the story in Yakuza 0, and I really like the story in Kiwami as well. But really, I'm mainly there for the gameplay and the combat. And I think the combat and stuff is probably stronger in Kiwami. It's kind of hard to say. It's similar. It's definitely similar. There's not a ton of changes. The UI is very similar. Just in general, the games are very similar. And it's definitely Sega trying to make an attempt to make the games very cohesive, right? Like, you want, the idea behind these recent releases of Yakuza games that we've seen is to get the Nintendo audience in, and to get the more casual fan base that's never maybe not even heard of Yakuza, but definitely not played it. It's for new people to the series, which is me. I'm one of those people, right? And so they definitely want to try to keep the games as close to each other as possible. They're all built in the same engine, the Dragon engine, and so lots of things are very similar between them. They seem almost seamless. They seem seamless to go from one to the other, right? The transition is seamless. So I think, generally speaking, that's a good thing, but it's a little strange sometimes. So, like I said, I think for me, Kiwami is probably a little bit better than Zero, but I could see it going either way. I think I'm at the end of the year, it's going to be a hard choice for me. I've already drafted the first of my lists for end of the year. As I mentioned the last couple episodes, my plan is for my end of the year list to come out on December 19th, which would be the Friday before Christmas. It could also be the 26th, which would be the day after Christmas, obviously. But I'm shooting for the 19th. That's my guess, or that's my hope as well as my goal. And so I definitely need to finish Kiwami by then. Obviously, I think I'll finish it in the next few days. And then I'd also like to go back to Final Fantasy III, and I want to finish that as well. I was originally going to try to finish Uncharted, the first one as well, because I had started that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm probably going to have to take Uncharted with me into next year, and I think that's okay. I'm not really too concerned about it. As long as I finish Kiwami and Final Fantasy III, I think I'll be feeling pretty good for my end of the year list. And I don't know if that'll put me at 40 games or that'll put me at 39. If it's going to be 39, then maybe I'll try to finish an indie game or something just to have 40 on the end of the year list. If I already have 40, then I might just call that good and do the cutoff. Because at some point before the end of the year, there will be the cutoff where I'll have to actually go make the video and finalize the list, and then I won't be able to move anything around. So if I beat anything after that cutoff, then it's going to count for next year's list rather than this year's list. So that's kind of... It's kind of a weird like decision. I'm like, all right, when do I make this cutoff? I've got to decide at some point here. So... We'll see how that all works out. I think that's probably going to be good for me as far as the games I've been playing. You know, I talked about Kiwami. That's kind of the main thing, right? Like, there's not been a whole lot else. I do need to, like I said, I need to get back to Final Fantasy III at least. I need to finish at least that as well by the end of the year. We'll see what else I can get into. But I'm sure that the beginning of next year is going to be crazy busy. I'm going to try to beat a lot of stuff early on next year, so... That's going to be exciting, and at this point, you know, we really don't have a whole lot of time to go. It's pretty close. You know, it's the end of the year is upon us, and I do want to say just one more thing before we go. I've mentioned this, or I say not before we go, before the next segment, before I go for now. I've mentioned this before. The Game Awards show is on the 11th of December. That's 10 days from when I'm recording this, 9 days from when you're seeing this, if you're watching it when it comes out. So that's a little over a week. My plan is to live stream the entire show, starting with the pre-show and going all the way through the whole thing. Live stream my reaction. I will react to the awards, react to the new announcements, mainly. That's the big thing. So that's the plan. As long as things work out with that, I'll be live streaming the Game Awards show. I did the same thing with Summer Games Fest. I did it with a couple other presentations and stuff. So that's my plan again, is to do that. And it'll be a fun time. So tune into the live stream if you would like. That'll be on my main channel. So if you're on Spotify or you're on any of those other places, or on the Not Just Nintendo channel, make sure you go to The Ginger Ninja. The links are all over the place. You can find them anywhere. To go watch the video. It should be in the description as well of this very show. So subscribe over there and watch my live stream next week for the Game Awards. That'll end up being, I think it's probably 6:30 Eastern time, and that'll be on December 11th. With that, we're going to get into the news segment here in just a moment after the break without music for some reason. So I guess it'll pretty much just cut right to me talking again. It's a little unnatural how that works out. So I'll definitely have to try to get something to put in the space here, because we can't use the music anymore. All right, everyone, welcome back after the non-musical break, the just brief few second pause, I guess. I'm thinking, like I said, I talked about this earlier in the show. I'm not going to touch on it too much more, but next time, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. I might try to get some other music to put in there, or I might just not do two separate segments. But at least for this show, we're going to still do the two segments, because that's just kind of what I'm used to. Let's talk about some industry news, things of that sort. There's actually quite a few individual topics that I want to talk about. However, none of them I don't think are going to take a lot of time, right? It's not like I have a ton to say about any one thing. I just have a bunch of things to kind of name drop. First of all, the Sonic movie universe. So I have not watched the Sonic movies myself. There are now 3 different Sonic movies. There's the one from 2020. There's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from 2022. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 from 2024. Knuckles was also 2024. That was a TV series, I believe. And now there's also going to be Sonic the Hedgehog 4. And that's coming out in 2027. And now there is a Sonic Universe feature, as Paramount puts it, that is scheduled for December 22nd, 2028. Now that seems to me like probably some sort of Christmas special. But I'm reading this off GameSpot here. They don't really have a specific, they don't have a guess as to what exactly is going to happen here, but they do point out that next year is going to be pretty busy, or not next year, sorry, 2027 is going to be pretty busy for video game adaptations, because there's going to be, at the very least, and there could be more announced later on, but there's the Sonic 4 movie in March, there's the Zelda movie in May, and then there's the Minecraft movie, the second one, in July. So there's going to be a lot of movies coming out. And it seems like more and more in recent times we've been seeing video game adaptations as movies and as TV shows too, right? There was the Halo, there was The Last of Us, some of these like really successful TV shows based off video games. And obviously there's a lot more besides that. And it comes the other way too still. I mean, we've had video games based off movies, and nowadays, we still have them. We have like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, right? We have things like that. Licensed stuff, but I feel like nowadays you don't really tend to see quite as much of the licensed stuff, or at the very least the licensed stuff you do see is not based off a specific movie or TV series or anything. It's just based off a character. Like there's the Wolverine game, right, that's supposed to come out in 2027, or actually I think that's next year, actually 2026, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, there's the Wolverine game that's not based off of any one movie or any one comic book. It's based off everything the character's done, and many different stories will be taken from, I'm sure. And so that's kind of how you expect licensed games to work more recently. But anyways, obviously there's the Mario movie, right? There was now the second Mario movie that's coming out next year in April. I think it was April, I'm pretty sure. That's the Mario Galaxy movie. So it just seems like there's always a lot of video game adaptations. I've not watched a lot of them myself, maybe here and there a few of them. I definitely want to watch some more of them. I need to watch all the Sonic movies, honestly. That used to be a thing. But yeah, it seems like 2027 is going to shape up to be a big thing. And I don't know if I'll see the Mario Galaxy movie in theaters, but at the very least, I want to watch it at some point next year. And I definitely want to see the Zelda movie, probably in theaters. I'm very excited about that. So I just thought I'd kind of talk about that. Alright, there was a Cyber Monday deal. I'm actually not entirely sure if this is still going, but this was the first deal for Switch 2s at Walmart and Amazon. It was a Cyber Monday deal for the Mario Kart World bundle of the Switch 2. Obviously, that came out at $500, where the original Switch 2 was at $450, and the Cyber Monday deal put the Mario Kart bundle also at $450. So that's the first big sale that the Switch 2 has seen. Obviously, it's pretty early, but it makes sense. It's a Cyber Monday thing. Yeah, I'm not even entirely sure if there's actually still... I don't think there is still a... I don't know if that deal is still available. Actually, I guess I can go check real quick. Look on Amazon. I don't know. But whatever. I don't know if it is still going. But either way, if it's still going, then you can do that. There was also a Cyber Monday deal on one of the Express micro SD cards. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting we're seeing a Switch 2 sale this early on. Obviously, it makes sense because it's, for Cyber Monday, and, it's pretty common to see console sales and stuff, but it's definitely, it's interesting, for sure. Alright, so, CD Projekt Red, they're the Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077, and some other stuff too, but those are their bigger things. They're those guys. Obviously, The Witcher 4 was announced at the Game Awards last year. We don't have an official release date on that, but they're saying probably in the 2027 to 2028 area. And they have confirmed now that The Witcher 5 and 6 are also games that are going to be in development. So they're confirming that this is going to be a new trilogy for The Witcher. It's not just like a one additional thing. You see this a lot. You'll see like a trilogy of 3 games, and then they'll come back years later and do a 4th one. But they're confirming that there's actually going to be a whole second trilogy of games. And so I imagine that these things are each going to come out at least 4 or 5 years apart, I would think, right? I mean, unless they do them all at the same time in the same engine, then maybe 3 years apart or something, but it's going to be a little while before these all come out either way, which is probably fine. I think for most people, that's probably okay because these are very long games anyways. I've actually never played a Witcher game or I've never played Cyberpunk. Never played a CD Projekt Red game at all. I do have The Witcher 3. It's one of the things that I'm potentially thinking about trying next year. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It's really long, and I'm not entirely sure if I would really be into it. So it's probably one of those things that I've got to just try one day and play for a few hours and see if it's the kind of thing I might like. So we'll see. I don't know. But if it's going to happen, it might be next year. It might not be for a couple years. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But it's interesting that they've already announced 3 more. It's kind of crazy. All right, the Xbox 360. This was actually, I think I missed this last week, but I don't remember. Did I miss it or did I just not do a news segment last week? Because I didn't talk about this last week, and I think it would have been, yeah, it would have been relevant last week too. So I might have just missed it. But the Xbox 360 has turned 20 years old. November 22nd, it turns 20 years old. Next year, around this time of year, we're gonna see the Wii and the PS3 also turn 20 years old, but the 360 came out early. So the Wii was on November 19th, 2006. I'm pretty confident on that. And then, let's see, the PS3 was the 11th. Okay, so there you go. So November 11th and November 19th, those are going to be the 20-year anniversaries next year for the PS3 and the Wii. So we're seeing the 7th generation becoming quite old, as it turns out. I still definitely would not consider the 7th generation to be retro. I know some people would by this point. I would say it's definitely not retro, but it is getting to be fairly old. It's definitely not current anymore. I'm not even sure I'd call it recent, but it is modern, I would say. I'd still say it's modern, but 20 years is a bit back at this point, especially in the video game world, which is a pretty young industry still. All right, this is probably the single biggest piece of news from this last week or something. It's something I don't really care too much about myself, but I figure even if I don't care too much myself, as long as it's like a big deal, I feel like it's usually still worth talking about these kinds of things because, I don't want to be the guy, like, I don't want somebody to, like, comment on the show or even tell me in real life, be like, oh, I saw you were talking about news, what happened? Why didn't you talk about the Steam machine or something? So even if I don't have any plans myself to engage in the material, I like to at least talk about most things in the video game industry. I know I'm not perfect. I probably miss lots of stuff, but I try to at least get the bigger things. I definitely like more talking about games I've played and things like that. That's kind of more my forte. But I do like talking about news and stuff and predicting things as well, and so I like to try to do what I can. So the big thing of this week is that a employee left Rockstar. Now, I don't know all of the details about this. I've not really been too involved. But they had a demo reel that leaked from this Rockstar employee, and everybody thinks it's actually real. So there's been a few of these in the past. A lot of them were AI generated. But this one supposedly is not fake. A lot of people think it's not fake. So it's a video. I believe it's been taken down and reposted and a lot of different stuff. But it's, it apparently leaked some stuff about GTA 6. Not anything too big, I don't think. But it was a lot of, like, small details with animations and stuff. People were talking about there's something where one of the characters, like, is on a bike, and they go to, like, back up on the bike, and people were saying it was very realistic how they, like, used their feet. How he used his feet to, like, accurately back up the bike. I don't know. I don't really plan to play GTA 6. I mean, maybe in 20 years. It's definitely not so, like, I could see potentially 15 years down the line, I find GTA 6 for like $5, and I'm like, oh, that's a great thing to have in the collection. And I play it for an hour or something. But I'm gonna imagine I probably won't ever actually play it. I suppose it's possible, but I would say it's not very likely. But obviously, either way, whether you like the game or not, I mean, this is a pretty big leak, pretty important thing. A lot of people are talking about it. It's kind of pretty big news. I guess also on the topic of leaks, although I'm not entirely sure that it counts as a leak because it is from Jeff Keighley himself. But there's a leak involved relating to the Game Awards. Jeff Keighley posted a picture, and it's like, I'm not really sure how to describe this. You should probably look it up yourself. It's on Twitter. Or you could just look up Jeff Keighley picture, right? You'll probably find it. But it's like a bunch of like skulls in like a desert, a statue, with a bunch of skulls on it. And I know some people were saying that it looked kind of Elder Scrolls-esque. Some people were saying it looked kind of Diablo-esque. And I think the majority of people were saying it was more God of War looking. And so this led to, obviously, a lot of speculation that they could potentially be announcing a new God of War game or something. But then somebody else was saying, Synth Potato on Twitter, that the statue was not something CGI'd into a game, but rather actually like a real like statue. Like it's just like an actual thing in person that they put up somewhere, and I'm not entirely sure why they would do that. I don't know if it was for promotional parts or if it was... I'm not entirely sure how this stuff works. Maybe it was part of the set. But this guy kind of showed more of a clip going around it. Now, again, this could have been totally fake. I don't really know what the general opinion is, but of course, he tried to analyze it as a Norse statue, and so that was kind of what really led to the rumor of it being a new God of War game, or like just a teaser for one, or potentially even a new IP related to Norse mythology. But then, the same guy, and I'm not sure if this is the guy that originally posted these things or if he just reposted these things, but either way, then there were people showing that there was another picture and it was lighting up at nighttime, and so now people are saying it's Diablo 4. I don't know. I just figured I wanted to kind of talk about this. I don't really understand exactly. This is a little confusing, but the point is, there's a big teaser. Jeff Keighley was involved, and it's either for God of War or Diablo, probably. So expect either a Diablo game or a God of War game at the Game Awards. I think a God of War game would be cool. I still haven't played God of War or God of War Ragnarok. That's what it's called, right? Ragnarok, pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's Ragnarok. But anyway, I haven't played the second one either. I have them both, and I started the first one a long time ago, like almost a year ago at this point. And I played it for like 2 hours. It was alright. It was good. But I had other things to play, and I kind of got away from it. And so at some point, I'll go back and restart that and play that through. And I was thinking about doing that at some point next year. So we'll see what happens. Bunch of people got Metroid Prime 4 early. At this point, it's not super early because the game does come out in 2 days on this Thursday. There's going to be a lot of people talking about that. I will not be talking about that because I'm not going to buy it this year. I might get it sometime next year, was the thought, because I still have to play Metroid Prime Remastered, and I'm kind of waiting to see if we'll potentially get a better way to play Metroid Prime 2 and 3. We'll see what happens. And also, I don't know, I've just got other things, like, it's just not, like, things aren't lining up. I really, I would really rather play the other games first. I'm not that excited about Prime 4 because I want to play all the whole series, and so I'm waiting for Prime 2 and 3. I've talked about this a lot. I don't want to, like, really get too into it because I talk about this all the time, but that's kind of where I'm at on that front. Assassin's Creed Shadows got ported over to the Switch 2, and I guess a lot of people are saying that Shadows runs really well on the Switch 2. I imagine if I ever get around to playing it, I'll probably play it somewhere else, I would think. Like, I don't know. I'll definitely do some more research, but I feel like by the time I ever get through the Assassin's Creed series and get that far along, I'll probably have, like... I don't know, they'll probably have another console out by then or something, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyways, so yeah, Assassin's Creed Shadows came over to Switch 2. It looks fantastic. I think it is capped at 30 frames, though, which isn't ideal, but I guess it's not really the end of the world. I don't know. I mean, it could be better, but it definitely seems like even on Switch 2, Assassin's Creed Shadows is running really well, and this is definitely more evidence that, like, hey, yes, it may be true that the Switch 2 is obviously far less powerful than the PS5 or the Xbox. But it's not far less powerful. It's a bit less powerful. I mean, at this point, it's about half as powerful, I would say. Because that's roughly what the teraflop numbers represent, and also you've got to consider the fact that there's like upscaling and stuff like that. So I would say that Switch 2 is probably about half as powerful, but it really goes to show that you don't really need all that extra power to still make something look incredible and run incredible. It really comes down to the optimization. And so if the companies want to put in the effort or are able to put in the effort because they got dev kits and stuff, games can run really well on Switch 2. Now, Switch 1, we are kind of getting to the point where big third-party stuff is not going to run great on Switch 1 because the thing really is just underpowered. And that's been the case for a few years now. But the Switch 2 definitely has the potential. Now, it is, of course, true that in a few years we could see the same problem with the Switch 2, but at least for now, things are going pretty smoothly with that. I don't have much to say on this one, but Team Cherry, they're the people behind Hollow Knight, obviously. I think most people probably know that at this point. Silksong, they said they apologized officially. They said it's unfortunate that the launch of Silksong disrupted other indie games. And this was in a Bloomberg interview, I think. Ari Gibson. And so they were kind of like complaining, or not complaining, but they were apologizing because the release date ended up being so soon after the thing was announced because they weren't entirely sure if it was going to come out in time. That's the kind of thing you run into when you're in like an indie game studio. It's kind of sometimes, you can flex those dates a little bit more. You can sometimes get things out earlier or later because the scope of your game is generally smaller, and you also don't tend to have like the big investors and stuff, or even the bigger higher ups in the company pushing for stuff to come out sooner. So you really can sometimes end up with issues like that. And so they were apologizing because there were lots of indie games that had to like reschedule last minute, or some of them just came out on the same day as Silksong anyway, and they ended up losing a lot of attention because of it. Because obviously a lot of people were interested in Silksong, and so they were apologizing for such a last minute thing. All right, the Embracer Group. They're one of the groups that are owned partially by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, or whatever it is, that we were talking about last week. Arc Games was one of the publishers that was under their house, their I don't even know, what am I trying to say? Under their wing, I guess. They were one of their own studios. They've become independent again. So Arc Games, they're behind UFO. That was, I believe that was a pretty, I've definitely heard of that. Hyper Light Breaker and Drifter as well. Do things like that they publish or partially developed or whatever. And they've regained independence. So it's definitely interesting. You don't hear too often about publishers gaining independence after being bought out. I feel like it's usually the other way, right? You've got independent studios that end up losing their independence. In this case, you had one that was previously bought that's now gained its independence, which is a little strange. I guess it was a big buyout within the management team, and they managed to make it independent again. So that's cool. I mean, it's great that there's opportunity for that in some cases, because obviously sometimes buyouts can mean bad things. Other times they don't, but it depends, right? Obviously there's some nuance there. Sometimes there's problems, sometimes there's not, but it definitely is interesting that something weird like that could happen, where you had a company that was under another company now not being anymore. Like it's kind of odd. You don't really hear about that kind of thing happening a lot. That's kind of all the stuff I picked out for today to talk about. I know a lot of it wasn't anything groundbreaking, and I really didn't know what I was talking about when it came to that Jeff Keighley leak, because I really just don't, I don't think anybody really knows what's going on with that. It was very vague and not super useful, but it was one of those things that everybody was talking about it, and so I figured, I should at least touch on it, even if I don't have an opinion on it. I mean, to me, it looks like God of War, but I could totally believe it being Diablo as well. I could believe it being some other thing. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I'll be watching the show, so we'll find out, I guess. But it'll be interesting to see, for sure. I mean, obviously, something like a new God of War would be pretty monumental, I would think. A lot of people would be talking about that. I mean, I know the first God of War was critically acclaimed, and the second one, I feel like Ragnarok might have even had a bigger reach, but I think it's probably just because it was a little bit quieter in 2022. That could be a part of why, but it seemed to me like that one might have even had a bigger reach. I'm not sure if the game was that much better, or if it was just literally because it was a quieter year that it came out in, but either way, both definitely had a big impact, and they're definitely big things that people still continue to talk about nowadays, and they're definitely games I want to play as well. So a third game would be exciting for me, because, again, I'll eventually get around to it, but it would also be pretty huge, I would think, for honestly most people. A lot of people would be very interested in that. There's definitely part of me that's like, oh, well, maybe they don't want to put out a God of War because, the PS6 will probably be coming out soon, but I feel like at this point, especially with Sony and Microsoft. But even with Nintendo, I don't think it matters too much putting out games too close to the launch of a console. Like, I think it still matters somewhat for Nintendo, but with PlayStation and Xbox, like they're just going to put them out day one on those other platforms with better versions. So I think they can probably just get away with it because like it's a stat right now that on PS5 like, or on the PlayStation ecosystem, almost half of everybody is still on PS4, and so if you think about the fact that half of the people still haven't upgraded because they've not felt the need to based on the new technology in the PS5 because the PS4 is still plenty capable of playing a lot of stuff because the power jumps nowadays are so much less influential and so much less important, right? You can still play things on a console a generation back and pretty much get away with it, right? Especially when a lot of people just play a lot of the same like 5 games that are obviously going to have support, like something like Fork Knife, right? I mean, Fork Knife could be ported to a toaster, right? Because like there's obviously going to be the support for that kind of stuff. It really doesn't make a whole lot of difference how big the game is. It's more about what kind of support and what kind of money is going to be poured into a port of the game. And so something like Fork Knife, obviously, especially when the game is already from last generation, it's going to be fine. It's going to keep running. And that's the case for a lot of games. And so I think most people at this point can get away with something a generation old. And so something like God of War, I don't think it needs to be exclusive to a new console. I think it can totally come out cross-gen like a lot of games have. So yeah, I mean, it does definitely seem plausible, even with a PS6 coming soon, that a God of War could come out before that. And honestly, if they announce it, at the Game Awards, it could still be the launch game for PS6, right? So I could see it going either way. I don't even know for sure that it's going to happen, so I shouldn't really get into the speculation too much. But it's always fun to kind of speculate a little bit. So I guess with that, I will see you guys next week on December 9th will be the next episode as long as everything goes to plan. And that'll be right before the Game Awards. I think next week the plan is probably to talk about Yakuza. I'm thinking by then I'll probably have beat it. And hopefully I'll have at least played a little bit of something else as well to kind of touch on a little bit. And then of course we'll talk about news, right? I might like a last couple of predictions for announcements at the Game Awards. And that'll be it, right? That'll be the show, really. And then the big thing is going to be December 16th, where we're going to actually talk about the Game Awards and what things were announced and things like that. And so that'll be one of the last episodes of the year. So that's the plan. But I guess with that all said, I think I'm probably going to call it a day or call it a show. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you on my live stream as well on December 11th. I'm going to live stream the Game Awards show, my reaction to it. And we're going to do all that stuff. That'll be fun. So, see you guys then, and goodbye.